vision predicated on continuing this conflict until Russia was defeated. Again, let's just make things very clear. Europe was dead set against a ceasefire. The European posture was, we must humble Russia. Russia must be defeated so that Russia knows it can never stand up to Europe again. That's what they said. I'm not making it up. And they met to talk about 800 billion euros worth of infusion of defense funding, getting boots on the ground. The French were talking about getting their nuclear deterrence deployed into Germany, putting air cover over Ukraine. War. And now you're Donald Trump saying, I want to bring this war to an end. If I only negotiate with the Russians without bringing in Ukraine, then we have a problem with Europe, because the strategic objective for Donald Trump here is peace and stability in Europe, so the United States can disentangle itself from the European web and reallocate diplomatic, economic, and military resources to the Pacific to deal with the principal issue of China. Never forget that. Ukraine is a sideshow for what Trump wants to do with China, not military. We talked about this before. I don't believe that Trump's looking for a war with China. I think Trump's looking for an equitable solution to the tensions that exist between China and the United States. It's a whole different negotiating posture and step, and I don't want to bring it up here, except to point out that you can't do that if you're tangled up in a war in Europe. And left to their own devices, the Europeans apparently were willing to have a war with Russia. That would be problematic for the United States.
Europe wasn't just avoiding peace. It was preparing for war. Not just any war, but a full-scale escalation, fueled by billions in defense spending, nuclear posturing, and boots on the ground. And while Washington once led the charge, Trump's vision flips the script. Pull back, shift focus, and leave Europe to its own devices. But here's the real question. Was this about Ukraine at all? Or was the real target something much, much bigger? The chaos on the battlefield is intensifying, and the signals from both sides indicate that we are on the brink of a major escalation. The fragile ceasefire, once again, has been shattered, pushing the war into its most decisive phase yet. Moscow, Kyiv, Washington, London, and Paris are all sending unmistakable signs. This is no ordinary skirmish. What we are witnessing is the build-up to a full-scale confrontation that could determine the very future of this war. With time running out before Russia enters a period of national holidays, the window for launching a major offensive is rapidly closing. The next few weeks could be the most crucial and bloodiest phase of this war. Let's break it all down. Ceasefire was broken. Once again, sides are preparing for a major battle. Over the last 12 hours, the battlefield has been ablaze with action, marking a clear departure from any notion of de-escalation. The Russians have intensified their attacks, launching massive drone and missile strikes against key Ukrainian positions, particularly in Odessa. The scale of destruction is unprecedented. Reports indicate that in a single night, up to 30 explosions rocked the city. This is no routine bombardment. This is a statement. The Russians are systematically crippling Ukrainian defenses, setting the stage for something much larger. The timing of this offensive is no coincidence. The Russians are racing against their own calendar, knowing that by mid-April, a period of relative inactivity will set in due to a string of important holidays, culminating in Victory Day on May 9th. This means that they have a limited window, barely 2 months, to gain a decisive advantage. They must strike now while they still have the momentum. Intelligence reports suggest that Moscow is gearing up for a large-scale offensive, one that could be launched at any moment. It could be tomorrow, it could be Monday, but the writing is on the wall. A storm is coming. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian side is scrambling to reinforce its positions. Fully aware that a Russian offensive is imminent, France and the United Kingdom have significantly ramped up their support, with Paris and London rushing to deliver much-needed weapons and supplies to Kiev. French President Emmanuel Macron has openly declared that his country will continue to arm Ukraine, emphasizing the need for a sustainable military strategy to counter future Russian offensives. A high-level summit in Paris, with President Zelensky in attendance, is already in the works. The objective is clear. Ukraine must be equipped to withstand the coming onslaught. But here's the catch. Despite this surge in European support, the United States is signaling a reduction in its military aid. This has left Ukraine increasingly reliant on its European allies. Macron, along with British leaders, is now carrying the burden of ensuring Ukraine's survival. With time running out and Russian forces mobilizing, the stakes could not be higher. Adding to the intensity of the situation, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is no longer in Kyiv. He has been moving across Europe, securing additional support from allies. His absence from Ukraine is a stark indicator of how perilous the situation has become. He understands that staying in Kyiv right now is too risky, both politically and physically. His government is walking a fine line, struggling to maintain control as uncertainty grips the nation. On the ground, the battlefield is shifting rapidly. Reports indicate that Russia is targeting command centers, attempting to decapitate Ukrainian leadership in key strategic areas. A recent Iskander missile strike obliterated a Ukrainian command center in Kramatorsk, dealing a heavy blow to the 18th Armored Brigade. Another devastating attack targeted the headquarters of the Lugansk Tactical Group, reportedly killing 25 command personnel and dozens of security forces. These strikes are part of a broader Russian strategy to dismantle Ukraine's ability to coordinate its defenses. And it doesn't stop there. The Russians have made notable advances in Yampil and Vasukivka, pushing closer to strategic settlements that could serve as launching pads for deeper incursions. If Russian forces manage to encircle Ukrainian positions in these areas, the battle for Sloviansk, a key stronghold, could begin in earnest. This is not speculation. This is a calculated maneuver designed to weaken Ukrainian lines before launching a full-scale offensive. Another area of concern is the southern front. Russian forces have reportedly broken through Ukrainian defenses in Tarasivka, engaging in brutal close-quarters combat. The outcome? A decisive Russian victory, with control over key positions now in their hands. This victory is not just symbolic. It represents a tangible shift in battlefield momentum. The Russians are also making gains north of Dnipro, slowly but steadily improving their positions for the next stage of the conflict. Meanwhile, all eyes are on Sumy. Could this be the next flashpoint? Reports indicate that Russian forces are increasingly active in this sector, with relentless bombardments targeting Ukrainian positions. While Kyiv has been reinforcing this front, the possibility of a Russian breakthrough remains very real. If Moscow decides to push hard in this direction, Ukraine could find itself stretched too thin, forced to fight on multiple fronts simultaneously. At this stage, one thing is clear. Both sides are bracing for a massive confrontation. The ceasefire is dead. The diplomatic posturing has faded into the background. The only thing that matters now is raw military power. Russia is moving aggressively, seeking to capitalize on its limited window of opportunity before its forces are bogged down by domestic considerations. Ukraine, on the other hand, is fighting for survival, racing to shore up its defenses and secure as much international aid as possible before the storm hits. The next few weeks could define the course of this war. If Russia succeeds in its offensive, it could force Ukraine into a position of weakness, dictating the terms of any future settlement. If Ukraine manages to hold the line, it could shift the momentum and prolong the conflict into a more favorable phase. Either way, the coming days will be pivotal. The battle lines are drawn. The ceasefire is a distant memory. The question is no longer if a major battle will take place. It is when. And when it does, it will be a fight like no other. If you've made it this far, you're seeing the full picture of how intense the situation has become. The ceasefire is shattered, and both sides are gearing up for what could be a decisive battle. The stakes have never been higher. Will Russia push forward aggressively before their self-imposed deadline? Will Ukraine hold the line and counter with the weapons supplied by the West? The next few weeks could determine the future of this war. Make sure to like this video to help spread awareness, subscribe if you haven't already, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the latest updates. Drop your thoughts in the comments. Where do you think this war is headed next? Stay tuned, stay informed, and I'll see you in the next update.